continue on with Fra Lippo Lippi, and then I have another handout for you. I'll change my lesson plan, sort of. I want to give you somebody a little bit different from Fra Lippo Lippi, which is Caliban upon syllables. I didn't realize how engrossing and even slow this would be, and of course it's better to have too much material than too little. So I was going to do Andrea del Sarto, which you do have from last week's work, but I'll probably pass over that and encourage you to read it on your own. I think a clue to reading monologues is read them aloud. If you read them in your head, you will lose some of the great attractiveness of them. I wanted to begin by remarking to you how I appreciate your staying power. I think Browning takes staying power, and I also am really amazed and very pleased at how much pleasure this has given me to do Browning. After 10 years, now 12 years, 13 years of coming here, I was saying at lunch that one would anticipate that I would just about run out of steam. And certainly the people I would be doing this here would be people that I didn't enjoy, because if I enjoyed them, I'd have done them years ago. And in fact, that's not true. I enjoyed doing Tennyson immensely last fall, even though there is not a great deal of humor in Memoriam. And of course, Browning has a great deal of humor, but he takes a lot of work to do. And I simply forgot, if I ever knew, and I may not have known, how wonderful he is to teach, because he's so oral. And these monologues need to be read out loud, and reading them out loud, you can talk about them. So this has been a vastly more enjoyable year for me than I had anticipated if I had looked forward 10 years from 10 years ago. I should have done Browning long ago. And so what I want to do is pick up where we left off and make sure we make our way at least through one of the major, rather lengthy monologues, which is the one we're enjoying right now, and that's Fra Lippo Lippi. So if you want to grab your copy and open it to page 208, we've been doing pretty well. Remember, the situation is that Fra Lippo has been caught by the guard or the police or you name it, coming back after an evening's escapades. And he is a man of substance in Florence. In fact, he's working under the patronage of one of the Medicis. So when the guard finds out who he is, immediately they take their hands off his neck, and he starts talking. They sit down. He sits down with the captain of the guard. And it is one of those occasions when people say things they don't ordinarily say. I was thinking about it last week after we finished, that actually what you have in this monologue is something that maybe happens to us when we're trapped in an airplane with a stranger we've never seen before. And sometimes when you're with somebody for an extended period of time, or the opportunity rises, you'll never see them again, truths come out. I suspect Fra Lippo Lippi would not have said any of this to somebody he expected to see tomorrow or on any regular basis. But he's a little bit tipsy. He has had his wings out, right? He's been seeing a pretty girl down the street. And he sits down in that moment of openness and talks to somebody he won't ever see again. Maybe you're on a train, cross-country, right? It's amazing. I was on a cross-country train a couple of years back, and I sat next to an attractive young college girl, and by the time we got to Seattle, we talked for 2 days and 2 nights, and I woke up with her sleeping on my shoulder. It was wonderful. And I don't even remember her name, but you do have a tendency to open up, and I think maybe that's what's happening here. He's in that moment. Liquor has loosened his tongue. And what he's going to talk about is what's most important to him. And I think it's pretty clear from what we did last week. There are 2 elements that really come to his mind. One is, how in the world did I get to be where I am? Right? Because the captain has shown through his response to the brother that this is not a very priest-like experience that I've disrupted. Why aren't you in bed, or if anything, at the altar? And so he feels the need to justify why he's been caught outside, right, doing his thing. And as soon as he justifies himself, but by the way, what's his basic justification, remember? Anybody? He never wanted to be a monk in the first place. He joined the group because he was hungry, and how old was he? 8. Well, okay, I think we released him from a lot of his vows on those grounds. 8-year-old kids aren't capable of making decisions like that, but if you're starving, you'll do anything. And that, of course, reminds him of what became of him, because he's not a priest. He's an artist who wears a monk's robe. And he starts talking about what it means in terms of his real life. This is his real life. This is a man who is in a horrible situation. He's a man of great genius and great art who's been forced by circumstance to restrain or restrict his art. Whatever it is he loves to do. In modern terms, he's an artist who's bought by a public relations firm, right, on Madison Avenue. And he spends his day imagining jingles, right? Right? Don't call them cookies because they're loos. You've heard it on the radio, right? My wife just bought some loos yesterday because the jingle has come, and it's been running through my head for weeks because I hear it every morning. And it's actually a very delightful commercial, is it not? And everybody's heard it. It's even got us to buy the cookies. But I wonder if the man or woman who wrote that jingle might have some repressed creative needs that the jingle doesn't satisfy. And that's his position. And so he explains or justifies his life, and then he says, here's a crack in my facade. The bitterness comes pouring out. On page 208, flower of the peach and the death for us all and his own life for each. This is a melody, right, of pleasure that young people say, that he heard them singing on the streets and he's got it through his mind. Do it now, enjoy life, relax, have a good time. Okay? And my whole soul revolves. He says, the cup runs over. The world and life's too big to pass for a dream, and I do these wild things in sheer despite and play the fooleries you catch me at in pure rage. This is where we were last week, remember? Why does he go out and play the fool? He says, out of rage. So all of a sudden, as a reader, you step back and you're listening to this man, and I tend to think that people play the fool because they're fools. I mean, I can take my high school students and divide them into the serious students who are interested in education and the kids who are not. And the kids who are not, we tend to categorize. I mean, the jokester, the kid in the front row who always has the quip that destroys the mood of the class. And Fra Lippo says, well, I look like a fool, but there are reasons for being fools. I know, because I know them, that the boy who sits right there, who is always calling attention to himself, had a father drop dead when he was in 8th grade. Right? And he's nothing but the class clown. And he will do anything to have a man he likes look at him. Okay? Even if the looking is, Tom, will you please shut up? Right? That satisfies, because he needs a man to say, I know you're here, Tom. That is, and all of us who taught high school know that phenomenon that underneath. And of course, with Fra Lippo, it's rage, fury at what his job has required of him. The old mill horse, out of grass after hard years, throws up his stiff heels so, although the miller does not preach to him, the only good of grass is to make chaff. What would men have? Do they like grass or no? May they or mayn't they? All I want is the thing settled forever one way. What's the problem for an artist? Well, you know, the artist is raised in a world where he's trained to have certain respect for art, creativity, that we get all kinds of messages, don't we, about the value of the artist, especially in the Renaissance, which is his world. But what does his boss want? I mean, there's a difference between the molding of creativity in America and what the man who's the head of the PR firm in Madison Avenue says he's going to get out of his workers. You see the problem? So we get double messages, don't we? The practical message, and then the real, and then the abstract or the idealistic message. We get it as teachers. Raise children to value the humanities, right? Value literature, value art. The other message is pass these kids, whether they work or not. And everybody who's ever taught knows that there's the conflict between the parents' demands of the end product and what the whole school sets up as the structure and the meaning of education. You don't like, pardon me, as it is, you tell too many lies and hurt yourself. You don't like what you only like too much. You do like what, if given at your word, you find abundantly detestable. All right? Because you have to say yes to your boss, don't you? You want to eat, brother? Then you paint this. You like doing this? Sure, sure, absolutely. I'm doing Bobby Burns right now in my B-level classes, and in A Man's a Man for All That. Remember the poem? You learned it in grade school. Burns is saying, you know, you cover up, you create these images, and all these people wear things. Which do you go for? You go for the external. You know, the king can make a knight if he wants to make a knight, but the king can't make an honest man, can he? Which is what Burns says. And Burns goes on then to make a code. We're in the revolutionary period, right? Revolution's all over. Everybody will be a brother when it's over. But from the history of 200 years since Robert Burns, you and I know that that kind of idealism isn't real. That Frali Filippi is far more real. When your boss says do it, you do it, and you smile. And then you go home and you kick the wife. And that's far more real than what Bobby Burns was setting up as an early romantic ideal. For me, I think I speak as I was taught. There's education. Do we raise children to speak as they are taught? I always see the garden and God there making man's wife. And my lesson learned, the value and significance of flesh. I can't unlearn it 10 minutes afterwards. You understand me, he says to the captain. I'm a beast, I know. But see now, why I see as certainly as that the morning star is about to shine. What will hap someday? We've a youngster here, comes to our convent, studies what I do. His name is Guidi? Guidi? What would you say in Italian? Guidi. He'll not mind the monks. They call him Hulking Tom. He lets them talk. He picks my practice up. He'll paint apace, I hope so, though I never lived so long. I know what's sure to follow. You be judge. You speak no more Latin than I, belike. However, you're my man. You've seen the world. Why can he say that? Why can he say it? Who's he talking to? The captain, not a sheltered man, not a person who's lived under kind of enforced theological world. You've seen the world. The beauty and the wonder and the power, the shapes of things, their colors, lights and shades, changes, surprises, and God made it all. What does Frali Filippi love as artists, Renaissance artists, would love? Texture, right? Shapes, smell, context, the things that come to you through your senses. He's being told to work for soul, right? But as an artist, what he sees is color and touch and smell, right? All of these things. Changes and surprises. God made it all. For what? Do you feel thankful? I don't know. For this fair town space, yonder river's line, the mountain round it and the sky above, much more the figures of man, woman, child. These are the frame too. What's it all about? What is all nature? All of the mountains, sky, and the frame, right? To what? To the beauty of man, woman, child, the things God made. One of the paradoxes of this poem is that Frali Filippi is a very clearly a disobedient and probably damned monk who has, when you read the poem and hear him, probably a far greater understanding of God's relationship to his creation than the people who are his superiors, right, or the church of his day. It's the frame. What's it all about? To be passed over, despised, or dwelt upon, wondered at? Oh, this last, of course, you say, but why not do as well as say? Paint these just as they are, careless what comes of it. God's works, paint any one, and count it crime to let the truth slip. Don't object. His works are here already. Right? That's what the priest would say. I mean, the priest would have the pro forma statement. Of course, man is created in the image of God. And he says, as an artist, what's the purpose of art? Make that reality come. Don't tell me, like some theologian, you can't reproduce the works of God. They're already here. Go look at a tree. You don't have to paint a tree. Nature is complete. Suppose you reproduce her, which you can't. There's no advantage. You must beat her then. For don't you mark, we're made so that we love first when we see them painted, things we have passed perhaps 100 times, nor cared to see. And so they are better painted, better to us, which is the same thing. Art was given for that. Now there is the classic romantic statement of the role of the artist. We should catch, by the way, that these are not the words of Fra Lippo Lippi. These are the words of Robert Browning, writing in the mid-19th century. And around the same time, Emily Dickinson was saying what I count first, right? Poets, then the sun, then the heaven of God, right? And she says poetry is, what a poet does is teach you to look at the flower next to the door that you've never seen before. Almost exactly the same sentiment that Browning is offering. She read, I should say, the Brownings, and knew them well, and maybe she even received her inspiration for that poem from this. But what is the purpose in romantic literature of the poet? To make you see. And he says the most gorgeous tree outside your door may never be perceived unless an artist says, look at this. Because the key to art is perception. We're back to Emerson, remember? Seeing things. Because we don't see. We are the blind leading the blind. And the artist is the one with eyes. And maybe only when it's in a frame will we really see the beauty, right, of that object. And so the artist is important. In fact, according to Shelley, right, ultimately important, the unacknowledged legislator of mankind, the one who sets the laws of vision, right, that relates us to the world around you. See, he diametrically opposes the image of his superiors, which is that art is simply imitation. It's not imitation. It's the creation of relationship between human being and the world outside. Art was given for that. It opens up the eyes of life to meaning, to real meaning. God uses us to help each other so, lending our minds out. It's a curious, what a strange line. What does the artist do? He lends his mind to us so we can see. And as a teacher, I don't see that's any difference at all. I think my role as a teacher, or even right here, speaking to you, is to loan you a way of seeing. There's not a person in this room who couldn't go home and read this poem. I mean, if that suffices education, you wouldn't need a teacher. All I could say is, please read these poems by Browning, and you go home and get them. But what many of us do not have because we don't practice it, not even because it's not possible for us to do it. We don't have the angle of vision that makes it come alive. It makes it, right? I assigned 3 Wordsworth sonnets yesterday to one of my classes, and I had a girl who's really very bright saying, these are the most boring sonnets, boring poems I've ever read. And she's reading The World Is Too Much With Us, you know. And I said, Leah, wait till I teach it to you, because I can make her change her mind. That's one of my gifts as a teacher. And she can't see it, but I can open her eyeballs. And that's why the phrase, and I've told it to you many times, that I use as a teacher, is that what I teach is how to read with your eyes open instead of read with your eyes shut. I use a visual image, and my kids never forget that. You taught me how to read with my eyes open. Well, a loaning of angle, an angle of vision. God uses us to help each other, so lending our minds out. Have you noticed, now, your Cullion's hanging face? A bit of chalk. And trust me, but you should, though, how much more, right? You got the servant here? Look at that face. Have you noticed it? No. Watch. Right? Sometimes when we talk about art, I'll grab a chalk, and the students will say, well, what is art? What are artists? You know, and make an imitation Picasso line, right? And just put a frame around it on the board and say, you know, chicken at dawn. And they'll say, what? Does that look like art? Well, it isn't art because I'm not an artist, but Picasso could have drawn something similar to that and sold it for $100,000. And you can use that to push it. Well, why would somebody pay $100,000 for Picasso and they'd erase it from me as soon as possible? Right? Because when you know it's Picasso, you're not only getting the line on the piece of paper, you're getting the angle of vision that created that line. And my angle of vision is accident. I mean, if I produce a beautiful line, it's an accident. It's not worth $100. It's not worth $5. But if you buy it and you know that this line is from the perspective of Pablo Picasso, the money is not only the line, but the vision that created the line. Does that make sense? We're in this post-romantic age. So a bit of chalk can show you this thing. How much more if I drew higher things with the same truth? That were to take the prior's pulpit place, interpret God to all of you. Maybe that's one reason why the bosses don't like him, right? That he can do with his paintbrush what they think is their prerogative from the pulpit, which is to teach the meaning of God, or Milton's phrase, to justify the ways of God to man. The prior wouldn't like that. Oh, it makes me mad to see what men shall do, and we in our graves. This world's no blot for us, nor blank. It means intensely, and means good. To find its meaning is my meat and drink. Right? The world is not a nothing. It's not a blot. I assume he means like an ink blot here, right? It's not just a squash of accident. It's not a blank. It's not a blank page, tabula rasa, right? That there's meaning in it. There's structure in it. And my job as an artist is to find meaning. He's as articulate as he could be. And then he gets an answer to his statement. Aye, but you don't instigate to prayer, strikes in the prior. When your meaning's plain, it does not say to folk, remember matins, or mind you fast next Friday. Can you imagine? And of course, the church not too long ago gave up that. Catholics today do not have to fast on Friday except during Lent, do they? And partly the reason they made that change in the church was because they came gradually to feel that it became nothing more than a reminder of an act. Right? Fasting is supposed to be a spiritual act, not a physical act. And they used the physical act to remind one of the spiritual act. True? And so you ate fish. It was physical impulse. But it became nothing more than physical. Why, he says, for this what need of art at all? A skull and bones, 2 bits of stick nailed crosswise, or what's best, a bell to chime the hour with, does as well. Is that right? Yeah, you might as well just write it on the doorpost. Fast on Friday. You don't need a piece of art, or pray, or a bell, which of course is one of the main reasons you have bells in church towers, right? Time to pray. I was thinking of this yesterday, doing Blake, and we're doing the Garden of Love, and another one of my classes, and Blake has this, of course, Blake is very anti-clerical, and the Garden of Love has been turned into a cemetery with a chapel which says, thou shalt not, over the door. So for Blake, William Blake, a church is, don't do, it's negatives, right? Don't do this, don't do that, and don't do the other thing. And he turns to the Garden of Love that so many sweet flowers bore, and what does he find? Priests in black gowns were walking their rounds and binding with briars my joys and desires. And I say to the kids, what does he mean, priests in black gowns were walking their rounds? And they catch it right away. You know, the priest is using the garden to get rid of, and he's saying a rosary, right? And he's not appreciating nature. I mean, the garden's not to relate to nature or to God. It's only Mary, Mother of God, and you jot it up, right? You walk your rounds the way a watchman walks his rounds to make sure the doors are locked, which for Blake is a horrible mutation of religion. All right? So you see the same thing here. Skull and bones. I painted a St. Lawrence 6 months since at Prato. Splashed the fresco in fine style. How looks my painting now the scaffold's down? I ask a brother. Hugely, he returns. I like that. Oh, wow, now that the scaffold's down, it looks big. That's a great, can you imagine how the artist would love that? Really? Big. You know, too many notes. You're going to see it. Already, not one fizz of your 3 slaves who turned the deacon off his toasted side, but scratched and prodded to our heart's content. The pious people have so eased their own with coming to say prayers there in a rage. We get on fast to see the bricks beneath. Expect another job this time next year, for pity and religion grow with the crowd. Your painting serves its purpose. Hang the fools. Why is the owner of this new painting of St. Lawrence happy? No, it's not that. It's not because it covers the bricks. What's happened? St. Lawrence is famous because he was a martyred house. And he was grilled. Yes, he's the grilled martyr. They put him on a griddle and turned him over. And I don't know if it's true, but he's supposed to have said what? You know his famous last words?
Do it again?
No, I'm done on that side, turn me over. Right? So he was like a charcoal grill. They like his painting because what's happened to the work of art on the wall? Well, he says they like it. Already not one fizz of your 3 slaves who turned the deacon off his toasted side. I love that phraseology. Like, up at our cottage, we used to have an old toaster where you had to take the bread out and turn it around to get it toasted on 2 sides. I always think of St. Lawrence turning over. Who turned the deacon off his toasted sides, but scratched and prodded to our heart's content. The pious people have so eased their own with coming to say prayers there in a rage. What have the people in the church done? They've scratched out, a fizz is a, yeah, they come to the church, they're so furious at this that they scratch out the face of the slaves who are turning St. Lawrence over to keep him equally toasted. And so that their emotional response is anger, right, and retribution, pious rage, and therefore the painting's doing just what it ought to do, right? Which, of course, is not at all what Fra Filippi wants. Art isn't for attacking the painting, but they like this. I mean, this is just the way it is. Hang the fools, after he's been said, has had said to him, your painting serves its purpose. Yeah, great. That is, you'll not mistake an idle word spoken by a poor monk, God wot, tasting the air in this spicy night, which turns the unaccustomed head like Chianti wine. What's he afraid of? He's reminded of. Has he perhaps said too much? He shouldn't have made a specific reference to that painting, and now the captain's going to go around and say, he just said, hang the fools? Ew, yeah. Oh, the church knows. Don't misreport me now. My boss knows about this already, so you don't have to. Do you think the boss really knows about that particular sentiment? I don't think so. But don't misreport me now. It's natural. A poor monk out of bounds should have his afterward to excuse himself. And hearken how I plot to make amends. I have bethought me. I shall paint a piece. There's for you. Give me 6 months. Then go see. Something in Sant Ambrolio's. That's the nuns. They want a cast to my office. I shall paint God in the midst, Madonna and her babe, ringed by a bowery, flowery angel brood, lilies and vestments and white faces, sweet as puff on puff of grated orris root when ladies crowd to church at midsummer. And in the front, of course, a saint or two, St. John, because he saves the Florentines, St. Ambrose, who puts down in black and white the convent's friends and gives them a long day. And Job, I must have him there, past mistake, the man of us, and us, without the Z, painters who need his patience. Well, all these, secured at their devotion, up shall come out of a corner when you least expect, as one by a dark stair into a great light. Music and talking. Who but Lippo? I, mazed, motionless, and moonstruck. I'm the man. What's he going to do? Yeah, that was not uncommon, was it, in Renaissance paintings? Painters often would throw themselves in there someplace. I think Michelangelo did it on the the damnation or whatever it is.
Last judgment on the...
Yeah, the Last Judgment. He's sort of falling down. Is he in a melted mass?
No, he's skin.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I meant by melted mass. He just, yeah, great. Yeah, he's going to put himself there. Back I shrink. What is this I see and hear? I, caught up with my monk's things by mistake, my old serge gown and rope that goes all round. I, in this presence, this pure company, where's a hole? Where's a corner for escape? Then steps a sweet angelic slip of a thing forward, puts out a soft palm. Not so fast. Addresses a celestial presence. Nay, he made you and devised you, after all, though he's none of you. What's he going to ask for in the painting? He's going to create a painting filled with saints. Job, right? He needs the patience of Job, this painter does. And then he thinks, what am I doing there? Right, I'm going to look for a spot. He'll be off in the corner someplace maybe to hide because he's in inappropriate company with the saints. But maybe he'll have a little... someone think, hey, who made this art? He deserves a place at the table. He's arguing his own case, I think, for immortality. He made you and devised you after all, though he's none of you. In other words, he's not a saint like all the rest of you. Could St. John there draw his camel hair made up a painting brush? We come to Brother Lippo for all that. I mean, right? Sanctity and art don't go together. You all saw Amadeus, the Lament of Salieri, right? I gave my soul to you, and you chose Mozart for your voice. The injustice of it, right? The injustice of it. Could St. John there draw his camel hair, make up a painting brush? We come to Brother Lippo for all that. Iste perfecit opus. I think that means this is the perfect work. This is the perfect work. So, all smile. I shuffle sideways with my blushing face. Why? Because he's... what are the saints saying? What are the saints? As he imagines this, what are the saints? Come on in. Come on in. We need you. We need you. I love the image of blushing sideways, sort of like this, right? Right? He's going to sneak himself into the painting under the cover of 100 wings, thrown like a spread of kirtles when you're gay and play hot cockles, all the doors being shut, till wholly unexpected in there pops the hot-headed husband, his real life. Thus I scuttle off to some safe bench behind, not letting go the palm of her, the little lily thing that spoke the good word for me in the nick, like the prior's niece. St. Lucy, I should say. What happened to the prior's niece? She got turned into St. Lucy, didn't she? But he's remembering that this woman probably gave him a few favors of the fleshly kind. And so all saved for me. And for the church, a pretty picture gained. Go, 6 months hence. Your hand, sir. And goodbye. And I know my own way back. Don't fear me. There's the gray beginning. Zooks. What does he mean, there's the gray beginning? Wow. Yes, and he doesn't want to be caught out. Right, he's got to get in there, so he ends up with better get going. I think it's a little bit too bad that we had to do this over a week span, because the poem moves around so nicely to a kind of art statement after the philosophy. You get the philosophy, you get the anger, and then he starts thinking. He's going to make. I'll show you. I'll make this. And as he thinks, he imagines the painting, and he imagines himself into it, and Lippi imagines his own mercy from the people who are up above the prior and his bosses on earth, right? We're going to say, we need Mozarts. We need Mozarts. And brother, St. John probably couldn't draw right with a ruler. He probably couldn't draw a straight line with a ruler. And there never was a promise by God that only the good would have talent. And so what he's essentially doing is asking for forgiveness, not only, I think, for his personal life, because he's obviously had an unacceptable personal life, but for his artistic antagonism to the powers that be. I wanted to do this one because I don't think there's any doubt that this is one of his great monologues, and it really is. It shows Browning in particular and his willingness to attack in a very straightforward fashion, the nature of art, the meaning of art. And it's as good a place to go to as any you'll find to understand what the 19th century tried to say art was. This is high romanticism, as you know, the mid-19th century. And you'll find the equivalent of this in American literature. Emerson certainly makes the same statement, and Dickinson does as well. But neither of them, even though Emerson writes in essays and Dickinson writes in poems, offer it in the dramatic quality that Browning does, and really give you something to chew on. It's a super piece. The other poem I wanted to do last week, or I thought I would do this week, is another poem that focuses on a Renaissance artist. As you can see, it's in the handout of last week. And it is the Andrea del Sarto, who was the perfect painter. He had the reputation of doing perfect painting. The faultless painter. Well, maybe. Yeah, if you know the monologue, you'll find that there's something missing in him. Andrea del Sarto is not Fra Lippo Lippi. And he knows he's not Fra Lippo Lippi and that there's something missing. He's talking to his mistress, his wife, his woman in this one, unlike Fra Lippo Lippi, who's busy. I think you could go from Fra Lippo Lippi on your own and read Andrea del Sarto and catch an extension of the same phenomenon. So what I'm going to do instead today is go from art to theology in dramatic form. And the second hour we'll look at Caliban upon Setebos. To end the first hour, I wanted to take just a fast read to you of a couple of poems that you should remember from college or high school by Browning. The first one is the British equivalent in destroying somebody to John Greeley Whittier's poem Ichabod. You know his poem Ichabod, in which Whittier turned on Daniel Webster, so fallen, so lost, right? The light he wore is gone. He was infuriated that Webster turned essentially traitor to him, to the purity of the anti-slavery cause. And he wrote this poem called Ichabod, which is as destructive as anything literature ever had, because no one could admire or respect Webster as a man of principle after it. Well, Browning wrote sort of the 19th century equivalent. It didn't work as well because the man he's attacking overcame through his own greatness as a literary master the calumny of this speech. But it's still a powerful attack on one who gave up the cause. It's called the lost leader. He didn't like it that Wordsworth became a man of the establishment in his latter years. Wordsworth, unfortunately or fortunately, lived a long life, and in the end, he was no longer the radical. And Browning felt he should have continued to be the radical, and he wrote this after he received an accolade from the government. I think he wrote this after he was made poet laureate and got the official stamp. It's not in your text. I'm just adding this as you might remember it. It starts out with this wonderful opening, unforgettable opening line, two of them. Just for a handful of silver, and he left us. Just for a ribbon to stick in his coat. But once you've read that, you can't forget it. What does it remind you of, obviously? He is a Judas, right? He is a Judas. This man who was honored of all writers was given a keg of wine and a ribbon to stick in his coat. So it's very cruel. It's powerful poetry, and this poem, as Ichabod, reminds you of how devastating literature can be sometimes to people. Just for a handful of silver he left us, just for a ribbon to stick in his coat. Found the one gift of which fortune bereft us, lost all the others she lets us devote. They, with the gold to give, doled him out silver. So much was theirs, who so little allowed. How all our copper had gone for his service. Rags, were they purple his heart had been proud. We that had loved him so followed him, honored him, lived in his mild and magnificent eye, learned his great language, caught his clear accents, made him our pattern to live and to die. Shakespeare was of us, Milton was for us, Burns, Shelley were with us. They watch from their graves. He alone breaks from the van and the freeman. He alone sinks to the rear and the slaves. We shall march, prospering, not through his presence. Songs may inspire us, not from his lyre. Deeds will be done while he boasts his quiescence, still bidding crouch whom the rest bade aspire. Blot out his name, then record one lost soul more, one task more declined, one more footpath untrod, one more devil's triumph and sorrow for angels, one wrong more to man, one more insult to God. Life's night begins. Let him never come back to us. There would be doubt, hesitation, and pain, forced praise on our part, the glimmer of twilight, never glad, confident morning again. Best fight on well, for we taught him, strike gallantly, menace our heart ere we master his own, then let him receive the new knowledge and wait us, pardoned in heaven, the first by the throne. Boy, I would hate to be the object of that. The end, of course, is particularly painful, is it not? May he not change his mind and come back to us, right? Because it would, all our anger would be called into doubt. May he continue to fight as a reactionary until he dies, and then may he be pardoned first in heaven, right? I mean, obviously you can't deny the man's greatness, can you? So, but not here. No pardon here on earth. God will do it. And then he'll get his just place, which I hope will be right at the foot of the throne. A totally uncalled for poem, by the way. I mean, it's really sad, but you can imagine the emotion that created it, and very, very good, really solid. I thought I'd read you to end this first hour. It's a poem, a couple of lines that you should remember. These are called Home Thoughts from Abroad. Because it's April. Oh, to be in England, now that April's there. And whoever wakes in England sees some morning, unaware, that the lowest boughs and the brushwood sheaf round the elm tree bole are in tiny leaf, while the chaffinch sings on the orchard bough, in England, now. And after April, when May follows and the white-throat builds, and all the swallows, hark, where my blossomed pear tree in the hedge leans to the field and scatters on the clover blossoms and dewdrops at the bent spray's edge. That's the wise thrush. He sings each song twice over, lest you should think he never could recapture the first fine, careless rapture. And though the fields look rough with hoary dew, all will be gay when noontide wakes anew. The buttercups, the little children's dower, far brighter than this gaudy melon flower. Remember that from years ago? Do you think it every year when April comes? For some reason, even though you've never been in England, you think, oh, to be in England, now that April's here. Right? And in May you think, it's May, and in June you think, June is busting out all over. Right? Every month has its day. Any comments about Andrea Del Sardo before we end this first hour? Any reactions to it or questions about it? Or the meaning and the role of the poet or the artist?
Well, he finishes by saying that I think he's talking about Rick with me, that he has his art, but I have my wife will be. So he really puts it on his devotion to the place.
Yes, I think so. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
We would read it.
Which one? Did I say Andrea Del Sardo? I meant any questions about making that connection. I thought I did. I don't think we have time to go through it. So it's a very fascinating poem, because I do want, tell you what, let's see how we do at Caliban, because I want to give you at least the ability to read this poem, and maybe I can cut it short and get you into Andrea Del Sardo as well. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, you're right. But he can't be, Andrea Del Sardo can't be Raphael, can he? No, unfortunately. Okay, I want to stop now because it's natural, even though it's 10:02, but we'll start a couple minutes early. Okay, so make our natural break now. Again, there's a handout going around that I had made up with Caliban upon Setebos for you, which I think you'll find interesting, or I hope you will. Let's begin with a short poem, sort of on request. I hadn't read this poem for years, and I guess it's right on your sheet on page 241, just before Andrea Del Sardo. And this is Memorabilia. And did you once see Shelley plain? And did he stop and speak to you? Remember the lady in this group who after the series on Mark Twain and William Dean Howells came up and said that is she still here?
Well, she's still a member.
She's still a member. She said how much she enjoyed it because when she was a girl, she lived up the street in New York from Mark Twain. And she used to see him walking up the street in his black coat and his white hair. And that's the way I felt. All of a sudden, Mark Twain, who died in 1910, comes leaping up to real life. And you want to say, and I've mentioned her many times, how quickly life collapses. Right? I shook the hand of a man who shook the hand of Lincoln. That sense of contact. People are there. Is she 96? Is she in good health?
Mildred Dwyer.
Mildred? That's right, Mildred Dwyer. Yes, she remembers Mark Twain. Yes. And we have lived one whole Halley's Comet since Mark Twain died. Right? It's going out again. Did you once see Shelley plain? And did he stop and speak to you? And did you speak to him again? How strange it seems and new. But you were living before that, and you are living after. And the memory I started at, my starting moves your laughter. I crossed a moor with a name of its own, and a use in the world, no doubt. Yet a hand's breadth of it shines alone. Or the moments in the middle of a desert. You can be walking in the middle of a desert and have a moment that will be there forever, right? You'll find something totally out of place or something totally extraordinary or wonderfully beautiful. And you can't remember anything else. I mean, obviously this piece of land has some utility, perhaps for something, but not for you, except for the moment you see. And it seems like that little poem is saying that's how Shelley must be. You walk through your ordinary life and somebody enters it, and wow, I was standing outside the Varsity Theater one day with my wife, and John Kenneth Galbraith walked right in front of me. You know what it's like to be standing there and you see this great, he's talk about imposing, he must be 6'5", with a great widow's stoop, you know. I mean, he looks like somebody. And you watch this person come up, and I said, that's John Kenneth Galbraith. I thought, I suppose he can go for many a mile without people actually doing that. But I knew who he was right away, and boy, I wish I'd stepped up and said, I've read your, and I listened to you, and but I didn't. But I'll never forget the moment, and I don't remember the movie. I don't remember anything else except that I haven't had Shelley though I have had Auden. I've had a few others, W.D. Snodgrass and Catherine Ann Porter, and you know, take your time and find that your own life has these. And they are sort of like this, aren't they? Like a feather in the desert, in all contexts. I mean, I have a vivid memory of where I sat watching Auden recite his poetry at the University of Chicago, and I have a memory of nothing else except where I sat and him. I don't know where I went to dinner beforehand or where I went afterwards, but I could probably go back to the same chair and sit there in the desert of my life looking at this incredibly lined face. You know, he had a face that looked like somebody had been etching at it with a, you know what I mean? Remember him in his old age? Terribly, terribly lined, but quite attractive, too. All right, let's move on to theology for a little bit. This is certainly one of the strangest pieces of theology you'll encounter in poetry, because the theologian is so strange. We forget, I think, frequently when we look back to the greats, the Catholic, the Orthodox, the classic writers, that they were contemporaries. I mean, that is, they lived a contemporary life, and many a poet and many an artist was writing the life in which he lived. Henry James, for example, when he was writing most of his novels, was writing about his own day. Edith Wharton was writing about the people she knew in the 1890s, and to us they are quaint and 1890-ish. But she was not a historical novelist. She wrote about her own time. We have made her history. And poets, I think, are even more a victim of that. I mean, obviously, Browning was writing Victorian poetry, and we have a tendency to think that he was writing poetry that was old and Victorian when it came out. But he was a very contemporary man, more contemporary than most, interested in the current issues of the day. And the poem we just read is a contemporary dissertation on the meaning of the artist, whether it's visual art or poetry. He was also interested in the current scientific uproar. And in the mid-19th century, among intellectuals, one of the great evolutionary elements was Darwin, right? The evolution of the species. Is man or is man not some creature that was evolved from more primitive creatures over long spans of time? And the 19th century church and 19th century Christianity was in a real hullabaloo about that. And he decided to explore this concept of evolution by getting into the mind of one who was on that verge of evolution. I guess the idea is that someplace along the line, thought had to evolve if we have evolution. I mean, there is the time when there isn't thought, and then concepts start moving inside the brain. And Browning was exploring this and trying to think, how did the first being capable of thought evolve such concepts as God? How was the idea of a God? It had to come, if we're dealing with evolution, through a perception of the universe that reflects something about the realities of that being's life. And whatever that being was, it had to be pretty primitive, since God or God images are present in any culture we have ever encountered. So we're talking way back. And he was struck with an idea. And the idea is that if we have ever familiarity with a creature that's on the verge of consciousness, it's probably Caliban. Everybody in the 19th century has read or seen The Tempest. Many of us have seen The Tempest. And remember, Prospero has a servant. He's got two servants, actually, doesn't he? He's got one that is spiritual and airy and beautiful. Doesn't want to be a servant, but is anyway, because Prospero has power. That's Ariel. And I suspect that most of us have a tendency to desire to think more about Ariel than about Caliban. Caliban is his other servant, equally constrained to obey, equally desiring freedom, but Caliban is a creature of the most bestial type, remember? He's disgusting and ugly, and he is irritable and angry. Ariel is sort of goes along with it, expecting freedom eventually, but Caliban is the animal, right? And remember, usually we're taught that in high school or college that way. You've got this sort of the animal and the spirit, and Prospero, the magician, controlling all of these things. And often we deal with them in ways as though we're dealing with Adam and Eve. These are the composite parts of the human being, you know, that whole business. Browning wasn't interested in Ariel, but he got fixed on Caliban and started thinking, if Caliban were that creature trying to evolve a sense of deity, that is trying to explain who he is, I mean, where he came from, what would he say? And of course, Browning is into monologues, and so he created this really delightful and strange monologue in which Caliban is talking about his god. He calls him Setebos. Caliban's dam, you use animal terms with Caliban, don't you? Told him that there is a god called Setebos. And this is Caliban upon Setebos. Caliban thinks of himself in the third person. And once you're into reading this, it's not as difficult as it might appear. It's also extremely interesting because you start getting a sense of how the 19th century might have imagined God's creation to have come about. This is natural theology, okay? That is, okay, in the island. And he uses a line from the Old Testament. God says, "Thou thoughtest that I was altogether such an one as thyself." Now that is not, in our theology, that's wrong, right? I mean, God is not altogether such as us. And mostly when we recreate him in our image, instead of us being in his image, we get a rude lesson pretty quickly from God that we have misunderstood the depth and range of his self. But this is what Caliban is doing. Caliban is creating a God. He's the first thinking being in his own image. It starts out with brackets, and he's going to, because he's such a reptilian creature, he's going to, turns out Prospero's taking a nap, he's going to lay down in the mud and slough off, because like a slave, he only works when he's forced to do it. So he starts out, he's very dumb. Okay, I'm going to kind of play with his sound for a little bit. Will sprawl. Now that the heat of day is best, flat on his belly in the pit's much mire, with elbows wide, fists clenched to prop his chin, and while he kicks both feet in the cool slush and feels about his spine small things course, run in and out each arm and make him laugh, and while above his head a pumpkin plant coating the cave top, as a brow its eye creeps down to touch and tickle hair and beard, and now a flower drops with a bee inside, and now a fruit to snap at, catch and crunch. He looks out o'er yon sea, which sunbeams cross and recross till they weave a spider web, meshes of fire. Some great fish breaks at times, and talks to his own self, howe'er he please, touching that other whom his dam called God. Because to talk about him vexes. Could he but know, and time to vex is now, when talk is safer than in wintertime. Moreover, Prosper and Miranda sleep. In confidence he drudges at their task, and it is good to cheat the fair, and jibe, letting the rank tongue blossom into speech. Those are Prospero's thoughts. If you get an image of him lying there in the mud, he's lying there, right? Miranda and Prosper are sleeping. He's going to talk about God, because he knows it irritates him, right? He doesn't want you philosophizing about him. And he's marvelous, submerged images. Fruit comes down, or maybe a flower with an insect. What does he do? He snaps at it like a beetle or a lizard, right? And so he lies there in the mud. It's cool, it's hot, mid-afternoon. Got water and little lizards. F-stings are lizards. F is the old word for lizards. They're crawling around his legs. He's going to take a moment of relaxation. You notice he doesn't say I. Did you notice that? Almost as though Caliban has not yet reached the point where he can say I, where ego is not yet evolved the way you and I have a sense of self. So here is what he's going to say. Septabos. Septabos. And septabos. Testing. See if he's cut down by lightning. Right? Do you hear me? Thinketh. He dwelleth in the cold of the moon. He imagines his God, Setebos, as having as his place, his home, not heaven, but the cold of the moon. Of course, Caliban is a reptilian creature who lives in the cold of the earth, essentially the water, the cool air, not warm. There's going to be something above Setebos. You might say that what he comes to evolve, which Caliban is going to call the quiet. There's something behind Setebos. It's the quiet. That might actually be the beginning of our sense of what God might be. But he's not sophisticated enough, so he's going to create a being that sort of reflects his own self. we would say, I think. But he's saying, Caliban thinketh. He talks about himself. Thinketh. He made it. Made what? Yes. With the sun to match. But not the stars. The stars came otherwise. Only made clouds, winds, meteors, such as that. Also this isle, what lives and grows thereon, and snaky sea which rounds and ends the same. You notice that his concept of God is, of a God, is primitive the way some primitive cultures have created gods that are their gods. You notice that? I mean, the God that created, Bermuda, stick with the tempest, and he's there. They possess him. So he made this isle and water around this isle, and the sun that shines on this isle, and the moon that shines on, but not stars. And that's something else did that. Think it. It came of being ill at ease. He hated that he cannot change his cold, nor cure its ache. Why was creation? Huh? It's awful cold up there in the moon, which is true, huh? It's awful cold. And so he did this creation to ease himself, right? Made this creation to ease himself. Hath spied an icy fish that longed to escape the rock stream where she lived, and throw herself within the lukewarm brine of the lazy sea, her stream thrusts far amid. A crystal spike twixt two warm walls of wave. Only she ever sickened, found repulse at the other kind of water, not her life. Green dense and dim delicious, bread of the sun, flounced back from bliss she was not born to breathe, and in her old bounds buried her despair, hating and loving warmth alike. So he. What image does he use of why Sedibos created cold, moon? What does Sedibos desire? Like a fish that is a creature of a cold, cold current that moves up the way currents do in a warm sea and desires warmth, right? I mean, and he leaves his cold, and all of a sudden he gets into this thick and luscious, warm sea, green with algae, I assume. And what happens when it gets there? In fact, it's not just that it doesn't like it. It cannot survive. You can't take a creature of cold and put it in warmth. It dies. This is even true in normal fishdom, right? I mean, a fish like a northern pike, you put it in warm water, it'll die. The walleye, it needs the cold. Its flesh needs cold. That doesn't mean that it might not, in some primitive fashion of its mind, think, boy, I would like to be warm, and it would sure feel good. But when it's there, it's compelled, so it both desires and can't abide. You think of Satan in Paradise Lost, right? Who desires heaven, but can't endure the happiness that heaven would offer because he so hates God. And so he yearns for heaven, but also is repelled by the state of heaven. And therefore is more in despair than ever before because he knows what it would be like if he could only not hate God, which he can't do because it's in his nature. And when you're called the adversary, that's what Satan means, right? The word Satan is the adversary, the antagonist. He is the spirit of opposition. Not like us. We can say, I'm sorry. Satan can't, which is very hard for students to understand. And that's why he hates God. Why does he hate God? Because he desires to be with God, but can't say, I'm sorry. And so there are elements here underneath this that most of us, I think, could understand. I desire, but I can't endure. Hating and loving warmth alike. Caliban can only think in tactile terms, can't he? But this is a pretty powerful image, after all. Thinketh. He made thereat the sun. So Sedibos makes the sun for some warmth, right? Doesn't do him any good. Where does he live? This isle, trees, and the fowls here, beast and creeping thing, yon otter, sleek, wet, black, lithe as a leech. Yon ox, one fire eye in a ball of foam that floats and feeds. A certain badger brown he hath once watched hunt with that slant white wedge eye by moonlight. And the pie with the long tongue, pie? Magpie, right. And the pie with the long tongue that pricks deep into oak warts for a worm and says a plain word when she finds her prize, but will not eat ants. Is he aware of the natural world around him? Of course, the Caliban is an animal, so he's aware of the habits of animals. The ants themselves that build a wall of seeds and settle stalks about their hole. He made all these and more. Made all we see and us in spite. How else? Why did God make man? I mean, what's our answer to that? What's the traditional answer? To know them and to love them. Right, that's right. So that he can show his love. As God made creation for love. And we are here so that God can love maximally. That is, he can have a creature to love. Why does Cerberus make Caliban's world? So he can made them out of spite. Of course, Caliban's spirit is the spirit of spite, is it not? Even in Shakespeare it is. He could not himself make a second self to be his mate, as well as have made himself. He would not make what he mislikes or slights an eyesore to him, or not worth his pains, but did in envy, listlessness, or sport make what himself would fain in a manner be. Weaker in most points, stronger in a few, worthy, and yet mere playthings all the while. Things he admires and mocks, too. That is it. Because so brave, so better though they be, it nothing skills if he begin to plague. No matter how brave or how much better his creation might be, what good is it if Cerberus decides to have a little fun? Right? Remember, Caliban is going to be a creature who is the object of other creatures, especially prosperous, right? Will and whim. Now, you're not too far here from King Lear in despair, right? You're not too far from the idea that, they play, the gods play with us, right? Like boys wanting flies, right? They play with us. Cerberus is going to be that. So it doesn't really, he can make a creature better than him and then feel better by just playing with, destroying it, if he wants to, sure. Look now, I melt a gourd fruit into mash, add honeycomb in pods I have perceived, which bite like finches when they bill and kiss. Then, when froth rises bladdery, drink up all, quick, quick, till maggots scamper through my brain and throw me on my back in the seeded time, and wanton, wishing I were a bird, or born a bird. What is he going to do? He's going to get drunk. He's discovered that if you take this certain fruit and you mash it up and then you put it in the sun until it froths up, it's going to ferment, and it's going to hit his brain, right? So he's going to, get drunk. Put case. Put case. What does it mean, put case? For example, let's hypothesize. What is that? Hypothesize. That's easy for you to say. Put case. Unable to be what I wish, I yet could make a live bird out of clay. Okay, let's pretend that since I can't be what I want to be, I have the power to take clay and give it life, like a bird. Okay, give me that power. He's trying to set up, in a very primitive way, a relationship between Caliban and his creation in terms of himself and what he might create. Because how else can a primitive mind even think of what a God's creative spirit might be? Would not I take clay, pinch my Caliban able to fly? What does he call the bird? Yeah, he uses his own name. If I could do it, I would take this clay and pinch it able to fly. For there, see, He hath wings, and great comb like the hoopoes to admire. And there, a sting to do his foes offense. There. And I will that he begin to live. Fly to yon rock top, nip me off the horns of grigs high up that make merry din, saucy through their veined wings, and mind me not. In which feet, if his leg snapped, brittle clay. In other words, in what feet? No. Well, could be. Yeah, could be. But I'm thinking maybe the feet here is in the. If you have a clay, you're making it, and then, oops, you know how sometimes for a sculpture you just come, whoop, right? Little mistake in creation here. I think it could be that though too. Well, and he lay stupid like. Okay, you make this creation, you break a leg, right? And there it lays, stupid. Why, I should laugh. And if he, spying me, should fall to weep, beseech me to be good, repair his wrong, bid his poor legs smart less, or grow again. Well, as the chance were, this might take, or else not take, my fancy. Oh, what would you do? You were a god, and, you create, maybe you think of Mysterious Stranger, remember Mark Twain? Satan, some crazy little being. And you make a mistake, and he's lying there with a broken leg, and he says, "Oh, God, please repair my leg," right? Make me whole, and you're God. Or you're the God he can imagine because this is a reflection of his experience. And what's God going to do? Maybe not. Right? Maybe not. Depends on how I feel. I like this part of the poem a lot. I might hear his cry and give the mannequin 3 sound legs for one, or pluck the other off, leave him like an egg, and lessened he was mine and merely clay. What might you do? You might give him 3 legs to answer his prayer, which he doesn't want, right? Or you might just break the other one off. Just for what purpose? I'll show you who's boss. I'm boss. If I want you to have no legs, turn him into an egg. Were this no pleasure, lying in the thyme, drinking the mash with brain become alive, making and marring clay at will? So he. What does so he mean? That's cerebral. That's creation, right? For God is an animal like me with powers, lying in the grass, drunk, and making and marring the God he imagines. Think of. He's getting ideas, right? Such those nor right nor wrong in him, nor kind, nor cruel. He is strong and Lord. I'm strong myself compared to yonder crabs that march now from the mountain to the sea. I really like to pursue in my teaching the synthetic element, which students find very difficult. That is relating ideas one to another. And 2 days ago, doing William Blake, as I think I told you, doing the lion and the tiger. And Blake is pursuing the same idea here, that attacking adolescent desire, that creation be the creation of a God who makes tigers. I mean, we desire our God to make tigers, right? Pardon me, start over again. That our God be the God who makes lambs. That's what we desire. We desire an innocent, beautiful God. Little lamb who made thee, dost thou know who made thee? Right? God made you. He is called by thy name. Right? He calls himself a lamb. Right? That's the God we want to believe, a harmless God. But what the Romantic period understood, and which was largely a reaction against the rational law God of the 18th century, remember? The God who made things with orders and laws, and then he said, this is good. Now you go and run the earth. The 19th century said, no way. I mean, you can't take the God of the lion, the God of the lamb, I get these animals right, unless you also understand that the God who made the lamb made the tiger, right? Tiger, right? in the night, right? Who made you? And if you look at that poem, it is an astonishing poem. And Blake, the tiger is not evil. The first thing the kids want to say is that the lamb is good and the tiger is evil, and God made good and evil. It's not the point. This is innocence versus experience. You remember Blake? Have you ever done Blake? You haven't. And Blake is saying experience is what supersedes innocence. Of course, the romantic always wants to go back to innocence, doesn't he? But no romantic of any salt would believe that you stop with the lamb unless you're in an insane asylum. I mean, they can be innocent all their lives, but any adult knows that real power is out here in the tiger. And those two poems are that romantic forcing you to look at that, and you see that Browning in Caliban is trying to come to terms with that mystery of God. God made Ariel and Caliban. All right? You don't, any attempt to emasculate God by saying he only makes beautiful, innocent things is an absolute denial, in romantic terms, of the reality of life. There's a lot out there that you have to accept. You don't know me, is what God says. You are partial, right? I mean, you're just a part, and I am everything, and any concept of God has to assume the totality of creation. And Caliban is trying to come to terms with that. It shows God not right nor wrong in him, nor kind nor cruel. Those are human terms, aren't they? You know, I ask the students, do you know that a tiger will eat the lamb if it gets a chance? I mean, that lamb is nothing but lunch. And that the tiger is not evil because it eats the lamb. It's just hungry. And that's the way it is. I told them, I said, you know, we all, especially adolescents, want this innocent world. You know, with little tiny children, 3 years old, you take them to the zoo. And you head right to the children's zoo, don't you? And in the children's zoo, they get to pet the lammies and the piggies, right? The little baby calves and the goaties, and right? And they're all innocent and they're all cute. And then you march them right out. And that's wonderful for a 3-year-old who is innocent. But if you're 17 and you're going there with your boyfriend and you say, please, Billy, I want to go straight to the children's zoo. Don't show me the tigers. You're going to be in trouble because Billy's going to be a tiger tonight, right? And you better be prepared for him. And that's the fact of life. True? Yeah. Okay. He is strong and Lord. I'm strong myself compared to yonder crabs that march now from the mountain to the sea. Let 20 pass and stone the 21st. Loving not, hating not, just choosing so. Right? Is that the way it goes? You remember the Nazis used to punish villages? Line up. Every 8, 9, every 9th man dies. Remember? This is horrifying. Nothing personal, but lessons must be taught. The IRS does it to us. That's get a little more real. Yeah. Not a matter of hate. Yeah. Just to say, the first straggler that boasts purple spots shall join the file. One pincer twisted off. Say, this bruised fellow shall receive a worm, and 2 worms, he whose nippers end in red, as it likes me each time I do. So he. Interesting if I had a blackboard, I'd try to show this visually. Does Caliban have power? Can you do this if you want? Yeah. Sure, you can walk on the side. I will step on every 3rd ant that I see. Try it walking home, you know. Right? But you go, right? Every ant carrying a grain of sand. Right? Power. You can take life. And Caliban says, that's what God is. That's what Cerebos is. He chooses some to win and some to lose. Well then, suppose that he is good in the main, placable if his mind and ways were guessed, but rougher than his handiwork. Be sure, oh, he hath made things worthier than himself, and envieth that. so help, such things do more than he who made them. What consoles but this, that they, unless through him, do not at all, then must submit. But other use and things. You notice that he imagines, you wonder where Browning is taking you here. He imagines that Setebos has created creatures better than himself. Sounds like Satan to me, doesn't it? I mean, Satan's problem is that I really ought to be on that throne. I mean, if fair, justice were served, I would be God. Caliban clearly believes that who is probably better than Setebos himself. So what is the satisfaction that Setebos can have? Well, he's got the satisfaction that even though he's created creatures better than he's the reason they're there. Right? And they wouldn't be there without him. Has cut a pipe of pipless elder joints. Pipless means nothing inside. Okay, the pith is the inside of a branch. So he's cut a piece of elder, cut out the pith. That blown through gives exact the scream of the jay when from her wing you twitch the feathers blue. Sound this, and little birds that hate the jay flock within stone's throw, glad their foe is hurt. Put case, such pipe could prattle and boast forsooth. In other words, if the whistle could actually talk and could say, I catch the birds. I am the crafty thing. I make the cry my maker cannot make with his great round mouth. He must blow through mine. Would I not smash it with my foot? So he. What will Setebos do? Yeah, he got mad, right? Keep your mouth shut. He doesn't want Setebos to hear what he's saying, but he's saying it anyway. And if Setebos heard it, he wouldn't be pleased, because what is he to Setebos? Nothing more than a whistle that you might, a duck call that you make out of, and it's just as though a duck call started saying, look what I do. I catch these birds. And you'd take that thing and you'd teach it a lesson, wouldn't you? If you were God. Well, that's what Setebos does. So he. But wherefore wrath? Why cold and ill at ease? Why would Setebos be so irritable? Why is he cold? Well, he's cold because Caliban is cold. He can't imagine warmth. And he tries to think through then, now to a higher level. Is there something besides Setebos? Why would he be the way he is? That is the question. Ask for that. What knows? In other words, if you want to ask that question, what do you have to do? You have to ask whatever it is that knows the answer to that question. Right? And don't ask me. I'll let's speculate. Just ask the something over Setebos that made him, or he, may be, found and fought, worsted, drove off, and did to nothing, perchance. There may be something quiet o'er his head. Maybe there is the quiet, call it, in this poem, above this man-God, man-imaged God that he's thinking about. Out of his reach, that feels nor joy nor grief, since both derive from weakness in some way. I joy because the quails come. With not joy could I bring quails here when I have a mind. Is that right? Yeah, because if you could just bring quails anytime you wanted, it wouldn't be anything to be happy about. You just do it. True? Okay, so this is the God who doesn't think like that. Setebos with joy, right? Because he doesn't have control over some of this, and he's catching that there is an element that Setebos, his imaged God, doesn't have power over, because Setebos is angry, right? Okay. This quiet doesn't have emotions because all it hath a mind to stop. It's quiet then. Why? It doesn't have to have an emotion. It doesn't have to have joy because there's no surprise. It doesn't have to have grief because what it wants is there. Okay, so there is something up there that is just quiet. I don't know of any other image of God or the thing behind creation that is as eerie as this in this poem. And for me, I teach in church schools, and I went to a church college, and I've never had this quiet being the word. It's a very powerful word, isn't it? The thing which is just there. It seemeth stars the outposts of its couch, but never spends much thought nor care that way. It may look up, work up, the worse for those it works on. Careth but for Setebos, the many-handed as a cuttlefish, who, making himself feared through what he does, looks up first and perceives he cannot soar to what is quiet and hath happy life. Next looks down here, and out of very spite makes this a bauble world to ape yon real. These good things to match those as hips do grapes. 'Tis solace making bubbles, baubles, aye, and sport. Why did Setebos make this world? Because he looks up to the quiet and knows he cannot soar. And so out of irritation and frustration, he looks down and makes the world that Caliban lives, baubles, sport. You have to do something with your time, don't you? And so Caliban tries that. Himself peeped late. That is, he looked down, saw Prosper, and Prosper is Prospero, add his books, careless and lofty, lord now of the isle. In fact, stitched a book of broad leaves, arrow-shaped, wrote thereon, he knows what, prodigious words, has peeled a wand and called it by a name. What has he done? We're talking about Caliban now, right? Caliban saw Prosper. Prosper's got a book, doesn't he? He's got power through the book, magic. He's got a wand. So what does the creature do? He makes a book, right? Maybe there's a connection here. Make a book and you've got it, right? Stitched a book of leaves, peeled a wand, called it by a name. Weareth that whiles for an enchanter's robe the eyed skin of a supple ocelot. Caliban's imitating, isn't he? Right? Look closer and closer to Prosper, will make you get some of his power. And hath an ounce sleeker than a youngling mole. A four-legged serpent he makes cower and couch. Now snarl, now hold his breath and mind his eye. He saith, she is Miranda, and my wife. What does he have? He's got a leopard, baby leopard that he's trained, sleeker than a young mole, right? He says, this is Miranda, right? Because Prosper has a Miranda, doesn't he? Okay? Keeps for his Ariel. Does he have an Ariel too? Yes. A tall pouch-billed crane. He bids go wade for fish and straight disgorge. Also, a sea beast, lumpish, which he snared. Who's that? That's his Caliban. It's himself. He is now Prospero with all his creations, right? With all his servants, including a lumpish sea beast, which he snared, blinded the eyes of, and brought somewhat tame, and split its tow webs, and now pins the drudge in a hole of the rock, and calls him Caliban. A bitter heart that bides its time and bites. Plays thus at being Prosper in a way, taketh his mirth with make-believe. So he, now what? What has happened? Who is the so he? Setebos, in other words, Setebos makes this earth, right, in jealous imitation of what he imagines, and then Caliban looks at his power and makes imitation. So there's an imitation Caliban, an imitation Ariel, an imitation Miranda. That's the way it's done, right? I mean, God makes things in his own image, we say, and so here's the image going on. You do get a couple of interesting insights here. No, but he blinds this sea beast. Why? I was just going to ask you a couple of details about his comments on Caliban tell you a lot about his image of himself. He's helpless. He's powerless, right? Not that Caliban is literally blind, but he takes a creature and tries to duplicate the powerlessness of that creature to himself. And what does he feel? Did you notice? Calls him Caliban, a bitter heart that bides its time and bites. What does Caliban do? He waits. Bides his time for what? In the tempest, what does Caliban expect? When? Right. His mother owned that island, right? Whose island is this? It's Caliban. It's his island. And the day will come when he can get rid of this yoke of power, won't he? And then he will be king. And so he waits. He bides his time. His dam is his mother, held that the quiet made all things, which Cerberus vexed only. Holds not so. Cerberus doesn't believe it, does he? Who made them weak, meant weakness he might vex. Had he meant other, while his hand was in, why not make horny eyes no thorn could prick? Or plate my scalp with bone against the snow, or overscale my flesh neath joint and joint like an orc's armor. Aye, so spoil his sport. He is the one now. Only he doth all. What is he mad about? How does he know that God just did this to, Cerberus just did this to have something to play with? He could have made him so much more comfortable, powerful, safer, right? He could have covered him with armor, right? So he wouldn't be capable of being wounded like some other animals are. You could look at animals everywhere, and they're all faster, stronger, right? Bigger, more muscular, better protected than we are. And Caliban says, obviously, if God had any care for us, he would have given us some of those traits. Saith, he may like, perchance, what profits him. Aye, himself loves what does him good. But why? Gets good no otherwise. This blinded beast loves whoso places flesh meat on his nose. But had he eyes, would want no help, but hate or love just as it liked him. He hath eyes. What do animals love? They love the one who feeds them, right? Okay, so Caliban is the blinded beast. We love who feeds us, don't we? But if Cerberus had given him the tools, he could feed himself, and then he would, our cats are faithless creatures, right? When my wife and family are gone to Wisconsin, you'd think I was the heart and soul of the earth, right? She hangs around me and she crawls on my lap. When she sees me, she purrs, she comes running up. You know why? Because I feed her. And one day after Sandy's back home, do I walk on the earth? Oh, no. Oh, no. Fred won't give me the time of day, True? You bet. Yeah. This blinded beast loves whoso places flesh meat on his nose. But had he eyes, would want no help, but hate or love just as it liked him. He hath eyes. Also it pleaseth Cerberus to work, use all his hands, and exercise much craft, by no means for the love of what is worked. Tasteth himself no finer good in the world when all goes right in this safe summertime, and he wants little, hungers, aches not much, than trying what to do with wit and strength. Falls to make something, piled yon pile of turfs, and squared and stuck there squares of soft white chalk, and with a fish tooth scratched a moon on each, and set up endwise certain spikes of trees, and crowned the whole with a sloth skull atop, found dead in the woods, too hard for one to kill. No use at all in the work, for works